How do you persuade with sound? What are the elements of sonic persuasion? This presentation will draw on ideas and concepts from the interdisciplinary academic conversation of sound studies, also referred to as audio culture. Sound studies is not only the study of acoustics or music or listening, it is all of those things. It is a series of conversation that occurs across multiple disciplines such as film and media studies, communication, musicology, history, a wide variety of disciplines, and investigates what is listening, how do we listen, how do we hear, how are we taught to listen or hear, how does hearing and listening affect the way we perceive the world? How is it related to other senses? What unique insights can be gained if we prioritize and focus on listening and hearing, if we make that a priority over looking or seeing? What are unique ways of communicating auditorily? What unique ways can we analyze and understand the world around us by listening to it instead of just looking at it? Let's start by listening. Actively listening. Listening is thought of in contrast to hearing as an active process. Hearing is just being aware of sounds around us. Listening is actively paying attention to them, focusing, concentrating. Close your eyes or put on sunglasses if you are sighted. Just focus on sound. Listen to the room around you. Listen for the people near you. Listen to the sounds of your body, of your breath. Listen for a ringing in your ear. Listen for sounds outside. Listen to the sounds of the building you're in. Think about the difference between sitting in a room where someone is talking and sitting in a room where you are paying attention closely and hanging on their every word. That is active listening. What would we learn if we applied active listening to as many things that we look at visually? If we visually examine the world around us, what would we learn? What could be added to this by listening actively to the world around us? The word ocular-centric means focused on or prioritizing sight, the eye, vision, the visual, and all of those related phenomena. Western culture is generally regarded as being ocular-centric. We say things like, seeing is believing. Let me take a look at that. We have many phrases and words and expressions that equate knowing, truth, and certainty with vision. The scientific method of establishing knowledge, dating back to Aristotle, is based on observation, and although there are lots of ways to observe phenomena in the world around us, the most common method is looking, seeing, reading. There's nothing wrong with any of this, but an ocular-centric society tends to overlook or neglect other senses. In, in a challenge to ocular-centric thinking, sound studies asks us to elevate listening, to elevate the importance of things that one can hear, as opposed to just the things that one can see. How would you listen to make a research paper? How would you listen to explore a park? How would you listen to learn how to cook? How would you listen to study an animal's behavior? This is not to say that listening or hearing should replace vision. That is referred to as a false dichotomy, that sound studies is arguing for not using modes of visual analysis or modes of looking as ways of seeing and understanding visual phenomena. Sound studies says that's great, but let's also listen. Let's not forget the things and people and phenomena that do not exist as concrete objects, but exist as waves of sound in the air. What can sound tell us? What can we learn from it? We already know much of what can be learned through the eyes, but what can be learned and experienced and communicated through the ears? Listening, especially active listening, is uniquely intimate. Sound is intimate. Sound is a way, particularly between human beings, or humans and other living creatures, that we touch each other physically without actually touching. When we are having a live conversation, I am using muscles in my body, and my lungs, and my tongue, and my throat to shape and expel waves of air. Those waves of air come out of my lungs, through my mouth, and into your ears. They move bones and hair and membranes, and those movements are translated into signals for your brain. But the process of two human beings talking or sharing sounds with other animals, living creatures, involves taking and moving physically something that is inside of me, the air in my lungs, such that, like a domino train falling, it moves air inside you. The movements inside my body create movements inside of you without me physically touching you. This is one of the ways it is thought that sound can be more persuasive than words. If I write a word on a page and someone just sees it, there isn't the same kind of physical, bodily, corporeal exchange of sensation and movement from my body to yours. And even if you're listening to this now and it's recorded, the sound moving through the air is still touching your body in a way that the visual world does not touch us. Because of this great intimacy, it is thought, sound can be more personal, closer, more interior, and therefore more persuasive. Because of this listening, it is thought that sound creates a greater sense of empathy or two people understanding each other better. Another phrase for this is subjectivity or intersubjectivity, where subjectivity is your brain, your consciousness, your sense of self, that with sound, we have a greater potential for achieving intersubjectivity, basically getting inside someone else's head, understanding their perspectives, understanding their world. It is thought that we can metaphorically get better inside someone's head through listening, because listening literally puts their sound waves into our head. The increased intimacy and intersubjective sharing that listening can provide can have positive and negative effects. One of the positive examples we see very common today is with ASMR, sounds that cause pleasing physical reactions. It might be listening to a groundhog eat a carrot, or it could just be the sound of listening to your partner breathing next to you at night. Sound can create a feeling, a sense of pleasure, a sense of excitement that makes the hairs on our skin stand up. Another area where you can notice the intimacy related to listening is in fears, concerns, and experiences of listening making people physically ill. This can range from, say, a Japanese noise band who creates sounds that make members of the audience throw up, to sonic weapons, to forms of torture using loud or repeated sounds or music, using music to drive people away from public spaces, and to thoughts and expectations about certain kinds of music that could drive people insane, dance into a frenzy, lose self-control, and other acts. Instrumental music is a particularly unique form of sonic persuasion and communication because it does not rely on symbols. Words, language, images, drawings, representations all involve some kind of illustration or symbol. Our brain has to process what the symbol means before experiencing whatever feelings that symbol might evoke. However, with music, it's instantaneous. A certain note or chord progression can make the hairs on our arms rise up, fill us with joy, make us sad and contemplative. It can communicate emotion without having to go to the part of our brain that processes symbolic information and language, illustrations, and things like that. It's one of the very few direct, unmediated kinds of communication. Of course, musical genres are a powerful form of persuasion because many people identify in a deeply personal way with the styles and genres of music that they like, and also may have strong emotional feelings about styles or of music they dislike. Many of these opinions are formed in adolescence when we are developing our sense of identity and may remain rooted in our sense of self all of our lives. Therefore, appealing to particular musical genres can evoke feelings of relatedness, community, identity, self-discovery, nostalgia, and be a powerful tool for persuasion. Of course, lyrics and the interpretation of lyrics by vocalists can be incredibly persuasive as well. Much like poetry or any other form of persuasive writing, the choice of words, the direct address, making reference to familiar people or places or neighborhoods or other musicians invoke feelings of community and connectedness and relatedness. Lyrics can be just as persuasive as any other form of words, but enhanced by the intense other persuasive aspects of sound and music described previously. In all speaking, not just singing and lyrics, the voice is a persuasive element as well. The tone of voice adds infinite degrees of subtlety, persuasion, provocation, seduction, uncertainty to the way words are heard and understood, much more than just a word on a page or a screen. The tone of voice adds a strong human component, which can also be off-putting sometimes. Another quality of voice that can be persuasive is what philosopher Roland Barthes calls the grain of the voice. And the grain of the voice means the way that you can hear in a voice, particularly singing but not exclusively, the body of the person speaking. The sound of a voice carries with it and communicates a physicality, a embodiedness that you don't get with the written word on the screen or a page. But whether it's the sound of the voice, the feeling of the breath, what you can ascertain about the size and dimensions and weight of the speaker, the voice carries the body with it. Brief sound effects or musical cues can also direct your listener in the where you want them to go emotionally, conceptually, or intellectually. They can guide them in a way that the visual elements on a page may not, acting more like sonic photographs or emphases. Some sounds have an innately humorous quality that can provoke giggles or a smile. However, you have to be careful with these kinds of sounds because if overused or used clumsily, they can be like the laugh track on a television sitcom where they start to become overdone and insulting to the listener and backfire, having an opposite effect. The same thing can be said for sound effects used to startle or surprise listeners. While it can have the intended emotional effect, it can also be overdone, like a horror movie that is an endless parade of jump scares. And don't forget that one of the most powerful tools in your sonic toolbox for impactful communication and compelling persuasion can be one of the most useful tools, and that is silence.